report to Congress on current and potential foreign investments in the U.S. agriculture industry. This legislation, folks, is long overdue. These foreign investments now reach into every aspect of agriculture industry and supply chains, from farming and processing to packaging and shipping. We cannot, and I repeat, we cannot allow our adversaries to have a foot in the door to our critical supply chains. Food security is national security. We must prioritize increased oversight of foreign investment in our food supply chains, especially those coming from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. This starts with giving the agriculture community a permanent seat at the table of CFIUS. The Farm Act does just that, and there's no better person to fill this permanent seat on CFIUS than my good friend who we had a hearing today as the new nominee for Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. I've known Brooke for 30 years. I met her while I was coaching at Texas A&M. She was the student body president in 1994. The students saw then that President Trump, what they see in her today, her strong leadership and her conviction of agriculture. It will be no different when she becomes the Secretary of Agriculture for the United States of America. Brooke was brought up in a small agriculture community of Glen Rose, Texas. She comes from several generations of American farmers. She participated in levels of 4-H and FFA. She raised livestock throughout her life. Now she is a mother. She's involved in the show steer industry with her 4 children. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture and Development from A&M and later earned a law degree at the University of Texas. Later at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, she was engaged with rural and agriculture communities throughout Texas. She led litigation efforts that focused on the defense of Texas landowners and farmers against federal interference and regulations. Next, Brooke went on to serve in several roles in President Trump's White House. She served as the Director of Domestic Policy Council, Assistant to the President for Strategic Initiatives, and Director of the Office of American Innovation. In these roles, she helped roll back terrible EPA rules like Waters of the U.S., or WOTUS, that targeted farmers and ranchers. After the White House, she joined the American First Policy Institute, where she focused on protecting U.S. farmland and foreign entities seeking to gain control, especially from the Chinese. The AFPI, she strove to improve American food security, independence, as well as support measures that defend U.S. agriculture trade. Brooke understands these many challenges. In short, Brooke is a conservative warrior and will be an excellent Ag Secretary. I look forward to working with her to secure our farmland from foreign entities and working with her on passing a farm bill that puts American producers first again. As Alabama's voice on the Senate Ag Committee, I will continue fighting to secure our agricultural supply chain so our agriculture community can continue to put food on the table. And that starts with someone like Brooke Rollins as our Secretary of Agriculture. She is a terrific nominee, and I look forward to working with her on the committee. I expect her to move easily through the committee vote and here on this floor. So once she's out of committee, the Senate must vote on her for confirmation. She'll do great. She's perfect for the job, and I ask that the Senate take up both efforts quickly to defend our agriculture communities, which feeds not only the American people, but the entire world. I yield the floor.
President.
The Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I concur with the remarks of my colleague from Alabama. We're looking forward to confirming Pete Hegseth. We're looking forward to working every single day until we get this cabinet completed. And Brooke Rollins over at Agriculture, we know that she is going to do a stellar job, and I do commend the Senator for his Farm Act. I've joined him in co-sponsorship on that bill to protect our nation's farmers and our farmland owners and producers. This has been an exciting week. On Monday, we started with the inaugural of President Trump, and I will tell you, for so many of us in Tennessee and indeed across the country, this has been a reason to absolutely rejoice. People, it's so interesting to me, Mr. President, so many people say they survived the Biden-Harris administration. Isn't that an interesting way to think about it? The inflation, the border, all the issues, it was like survival to get through those 4 years. And because of this, the American people have really given the Trump administration and those of us in Congress a mandate. I refer to it as a to-do list, because at the Blackburn household, when there's something that has to be addressed, Chuck and I put it on a to-do list, meaning you don't stop until you get it done. Well, the good thing is, one of the top things is the southern border and securing that, and indeed, we know President Trump has taken executive action to address this. He cut off that CBP One app and ended these migrant flights from other countries. He's ended catch and release. He restored the successful Remain in Mexico program, and importantly, he is designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Now, there are other things that he is doing. We all know that ICE is conducting raids and doing deportations, and we know that Congress is going to have to work with the Trump administration to make certain that these executive actions that he's taking, that we pass laws so that this is in federal statute. Now, one of those is the CLEAR Act, which is legislation I've had for years, and it ensures that state and local law enforcement officials can help the federal government with deporting these criminal illegal aliens. And by the way, that legislation requires ICE to reimburse those local law enforcement agencies. And of course, my Container Act, which again has been here for a while, it would empower the border communities, those communities that are right there on that border, farmers, ranchers, communities that those crossing illegally are running through their property. It would allow them to place barriers on federal land in order to protect their communities. And my Preventing Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act, it would require illegals convicted of sexual offenses or domestic violence to be deported. These are individuals that have absolutely no business being in this country. And of course, we're going to have to do more than secure our border, and that means doing mass deportations. And here is the reason why. Under former President Biden, more than 10 million illegal aliens came into this country. Now, those are the ones we know about. On top of this, you have a classification that is called the gotaways. The gotaways are those that the Border Patrol could see on the camera, but they could not get to them to apprehend them. We know that in this number, you've got tens of thousands of criminal illegal aliens. These are not people that are coming for a better way of life. These are people that have committed crimes in their home countries and are looking to come here. Now, we know this open border has caused far too many tragedies to begin to count. And this is the reason that this body voted in a bipartisan manner for the Laken-Riley Act, and that is going to be one of the very first bills that President Trump signs into law. And because of the American public's overwhelming support for a secure border, for an end to illegal immigration, we are on our way to making this country, making our communities safe again. Now, we all know that border security is a critical part of national security. Indeed, that southern border is where national security and our foreign affairs actually meet, because that border is being overrun by people from about 150 different countries every single year. Now, we also know that when it comes to national security and how the world views us, that President Trump is showing that strong leadership that is needed, and he was able to secure the release of 2 Americans that were held by the Taliban within hours of taking office. I think that the American people are realizing that President Trump means business when it comes to our foreign policy and putting the interest of the American people in front of everything else. Another issue that we're focused on for the American people is getting the cost of living back under control. We all know that for the 4 years of the Biden administration, we saw record inflation, we saw reckless spending, and Tennesseans and indeed our citizens all across the country are still reeling from inflation. You know, Mr. President, to me, it is just so interesting. When people talk about the rate of inflation, they know it's not 2.9%, which the Biden administration was touting as they left office. If you go back and look at where prices were in January of 2021, when Joe Biden took office and inflation was at 1.4%, and then you look at what has happened month by month, the true rate of inflation and price escalation, that true rate of inflation is north of 20%. Indeed, I looked up what it is costing Tennessee families, and Mr. President, the numbers were astounding, because if you look at a basket of goods and services that a Tennessee family would buy in January 2021, so if they took that basket of goods and services, bought that same basket of goods and services, today, their cost would be $1,060 more for the exact same basket of goods and services. Think about that, $1,060 per month. Now, maybe that's a house payment or the equivalent of a car payment. That is a lot of money. And this is why Americans are saying we want life to be affordable again. And it is why President Trump has already signed executive orders to roll back regulations. And it's why he is moving forward with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which will bring forward ideas of how we root out waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. And it's why he has frozen federal hiring and done that hiring freeze, which is so essential to being able to cap what the federal employment roles are and get going on doging all of these agencies. Well, to support these efforts, I filed a series of bills called the DOGE Acts. And, you know, Mr. President, these are not things that are new. These are bills that I have been pushing for a long time, because it is important that we hold government accountable for how they're spending the taxpayer money. And President Trump is pushing forward with these concepts. Another area where we are going to see attention in order to get the cost of living down is extending President Trump's tax cuts to ensure that the American people are going to have more money in their pocket at the end of the month. You know, Mr. President, there's a gentleman in Tennessee that I ran into one day earlier in the Biden administration, and I asked how he was doing. And he said, well, he had been fussing a little bit. What he was fussing about was the high price at the pump and the high price at the grocery store. And he said, you know, under President Trump, I had some money left at the end of the month. And under Joe Biden, I've got too much month left at the end of my money. People are tired of being broke. They are tired of it. So they're ready to move forward. Another area where they're wanting to see some action, and they're so pleased with the steps President Trump has taken, and that is protecting young women in sports. And it's amazing to me how the left has abandoned our high school and college female athletes. You know, we have over 3 million young women who participate in sports every single day. They're competing. Mr. President, you've got 2 beautiful daughters. They are competitive athletes. These girls work hard, and they deserve to be able to compete and win, but it is as if the Biden-Harris administration waged a war on these incredible young female athletes by destroying fair play and forcing them to compete against biological men. And the results are tragic. Young women who often dedicate their entire lives to becoming so proficient and skilled at a sport, they're missing out on scholarships, on career opportunities, and on hard-earned records that they deserve to hold. This harm, abuse, and unfairness is coming to an end. And on Monday, President Trump signed an executive order that requires the federal government to recognize the biological reality of 2 sexes, male and female. And last week, I reintroduced legislation that helps to stand up for women and girls in sports. Now, there are 2 resolutions. One is calling on the NCAA to protect women in sports. They need to rescind their rule that allows biological men to compete against women in NCAA sports. And then the other is to take October 10th of each and every year and designate this as American Girls in Sports Day and celebrate the accomplishments of our female athletes. I also have the Fair Play for Girls Act. It will require the U.S. Attorney General to submit an analysis of violence against women in athletics, to submit that to Congress, as well as for policy recommendations to support these young women. Well, as you can see, the to-do list is long, and I've barely scratched the surface. The American people are looking forward to Republicans delivering on the mandate that they have issued, and they certainly are looking forward to what will be the golden age of America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise now for the 296th time to direct our attention to what is coming at us through fossil fuel emissions causing our natural systems to be significantly disturbed. We are not yet all the way through the first week of the second Trump administration, and already Trump has made his priorities clear. Looters and polluters reign, and their feeding frenzy comes at the expense of the American people. I expect the looting and polluting has only just begun. So we've made a new chart that will surely see the Senate floor again. When President Trump needed cash for his campaign, he knew just who to ask. He convened big oil CEOs at Mar-a-Lago. He requested that they pony up $1 billion for his campaign. And he promised them he'd immediately reverse dozens of President Biden's environmental rules and policies and stop new ones from being enacted. Giving him $1 billion, he said, would be a deal because of the taxation and regulation they would avoid thanks to him. Well, he's right about that being a super deal for polluters. The industry benefits from more than $700 billion a year in subsidy in the United States alone. $1 billion to Trump to protect $700 billion to the industry. Pretty good return on investment for fossil fuel. Well, Trump won. And the billionaires who funded President Trump's campaign want their payback. Payback began this week with a big score for the looters and polluters. On his first day, President Trump signed executive orders to lay the groundwork for weakening vehicle emission standards, raising costs for families, an average of $6,000 to $8,000, while also harming public health from the added emissions and weakening our American automobile industry's global competitiveness. A major gift to big oil at the expense of regular Americans and consumers. To review EPA's 2009 finding that the greenhouse gases are a danger, even though that finding has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The winners, the polluters driving climate change. Dramatically reduce or eliminate the social cost of carbon to protect the fossil fuel free to pollute business model. Make subsidized fossil fuel winners over domestic clean energy losers. You remember when Republicans used to say government shouldn't pick winners and losers? Until it's the fossil fuel industry. Withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement, helping fossil fuel undermine global efforts to reduce their greenhouse gas pollution. Stopping offshore wind development. Clean energy competition to his fossil fuel funders at the expense of American consumers, workers, and our own domestic manufacturing base. Rhode Island, by the way, is home to the nation's first offshore wind farm and a growing number of good union jobs in the industry. Would President Trump say to the country that on his first day in office it was time to repay his big oil donors? Well, that wouldn't have gone over well. So he had to pretend that all these donor handouts would benefit the public. His first day executive order on energy begins by stating, America's blessed with an abundance of energy and natural resources that have historically powered our nation's economic prosperity. In recent years, burdensome and ideologically motivated regulations have impeded the development of these resources, limited the generation of reliable and affordable electricity, reduced job creation, and inflicted high energy costs upon our citizens. These high energy costs devastate American consumers by driving up the cost of transportation, heating, utilities, farming, and manufacturing while weakening our national security. Virtually none of that is true. So let's look at the claims one by one. First, yeah, he got this right. America is indeed blessed with energy abundance. Where it's particularly abundant is in wind power. We have the third greatest offshore wind power potential of any country in the world. We have the fourth greatest onshore wind potential anywhere in the world. Indeed, wind resources in the Great Plains states alone could supply the U.S. with 16 times our electricity demand. That's energy abundance. Then, as this map from our national labs shows, we have amazing solar energy resource potential, particularly in the Southwest and through the Southeast. Now, Trump defines energy as, and I'm quoting here, crude oil, natural gas, least condensates, natural gas liquids, refined petroleum products, uranium, coal, biofuels, geothermal heat, the kinetic movement of flowing water, and critical minerals. Notice anything missing? That is literally every possible iteration of fossil fuel, plus nuclear, geothermal, and hydro. Everything except wind and solar, which produced more electricity than coal last year and could power the entire country. Trump next claims regulations have impeded the development of energy resources, and by that, as we've just heard, he means fossil fuels. Well, as he would say, wrong. Under President Biden, and actually, regrettably, from a climate point of view, the U.S. produced more oil than ever before in the Biden years. Indeed, setting monthly records for oil production. So that wasn't true either. Well, it is foolish to abandon those enormous wind and solar assets, not good for our country or our economy, good only for their fossil fuel competition. And there's an additional big economic danger if we stick with oil, because the U.S. is a high-cost oil producer. The average cost to produce a barrel of U.S. crude ranges from $50 to $70. In Saudi Arabia, the marginal cost of production is around $10 a barrel. $50 to $70 for us, $10 for the Saudis. That means our industry will always be vulnerable to cheaper foreign producers. And by the way, it has happened before. In 2015, the Saudis decided they didn't like America producing so much. So they turned on their spigots, causing a big hit to American oil and gas companies. Once they had tanked American production, they reduced their own back to normal levels, and the price of gasoline spiked for our consumers. They can do that again anytime they want. It is basic business and economic sense not to put all your eggs in an industry where you're the high-cost producer. We have competitive advantage in wind and solar with those massive resources and continent-straddling range that spans multiple time zones, allowing wind and solar energy to be sent wherever the wind isn't then blowing or wherever the sun isn't then shining. We have massive clean energy opportunities. Trump claims that existing energy policies have reduced job creation. Again, wrong. Oil patch jobs have been reduced not by regulations, but by automation. Where the country has seen a job boom is in the low-carbon energy sectors, with more than 400,000 jobs created since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Low-carbon energy now employs more people than fossil energy. It's where the jobs are. Not that big oil cares about that for 1 minute. Trump claims that renewable energy is driving up energy costs for Americans. Wrong again. Solar and wind have for some time been the least expensive forms of energy that there are. Wind is the bottom blue line. Solar panels is the bottom yellow line. They have been the cheapest since 2015, or if you go back further, 2013. We've had a solid decade of wind and solar being the least expensive forms of energy for the American public, but big oil doesn't care. They just want to sell their dirty product. What does actually drive up energy costs for Americans? The greed of big oil. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, OPEC, the international cartel, jacked up prices, and U.S. oil producers rode along to epic profits off of those events. You just have to look at their sworn financial statements filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission about what profits they earned. They earned the biggest profits in the history of the world. In a nutshell, they gouged. Electricity bills also rose when the price of natural gas spiked after that Russian invasion. Climate change means Americans are spending more to cool their homes because it's hotter than it's ever been. If you're living in Phoenix or Houston or Tampa, you're likely running your air conditioner nonstop for months on end. And that's on your electricity bill. And that's just going to get worse as Trump's looters and polluters have their way. Climate change-fueled wildfires are forcing utilities in the West to spend billions burying transmission and distribution lines to avoid sparking more fires. That increases electric bills, another climate cost to consumers. And obviously, Trump's decision to let his big LNG donors export more LNG will drive up natural gas prices here at home. When there's less at home because more is going overseas, prices go up. That's supply and demand 101. And here again, under Trump, fossil fuel wins, American families lose, and big oil doesn't care. The wind and sun and flowing water and the earth's heat are all free fuels. Fossil fuels put us at the mercy of foreign petro-dictators and predatory cartels. Just from a national security perspective, why not choose the free fuels that no outside actor controls? And then, of course, come the costs of climate change itself, burdening American families with climateflation, from grocery staples to insurance prices to shipping costs, all rising as the result of climate change disrupting agriculture, weather, and transit. Even a little gas price gouging by the industry thrown in. That's just the climateflation. Then comes the danger to our entire economy. For a look into coming attractions, check out what's happening out in Los Angeles, where raging Santa Ana winds turbocharged wildfires tearing through American families' homes, much because of climate change. Climate change is perhaps the biggest systemic financial risk to our economy and thus to families' personal finances. And where is this coming true first? In the insurance markets. Insurance markets are the leading edge of our time of consequences. The LA fires, with insured losses in the tens of billions of dollars and total economic losses likely in the hundreds of billions, On top of last fall's hurricanes, which resulted in hundreds of billions in economic losses in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, are a dangerous blow to tottering insurance markets. In recent years, millions of Americans had insurance policies canceled due to rising climate risk. Millions more saw skyrocketing premiums, particularly in Florida, that forced families, in some cases, to drop coverage, leaving their family's most important financial asset, their home, exposed. Insurers are pulling out of some markets altogether. Insurers are going bankrupt. Insurers are flooding mailboxes with price hikes and notices of cancellation and non-renewals, and that all hits property values. So the concern here is cascading failures. Cascading failures from the insurance market to the mortgage market to a property values collapse. And that ends in economy-wide catastrophe. Along the way, home ownership will move further out of reach for the middle class as homes are burdened with more